Hello everybody and welcome back to another session of Tabletop 100. Last time we talked a bit about the classes that you could play as in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and today we're going to be covering the basics of spellcasting. Now, when I have taught other people the system in the past, spellcasting has been one of the most difficult things for people to wrap their head around. They see it as a daunting and complex system. I am here to assuage those fears and tell you it is not nearly as complicated as it appears to be at first glance. Most classes gain spells one way or another. They might get them in different ways, but there is one thing that they all tend to share: spell slots. A spell slot will tell you how many times you can cast a spell at any given level. But wait, I hear you ask, spells have levels? Yes, in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, as well as a lot of other tabletop systems, spells have levels. In D&D, they tend to go from 1 to 9, with 0th level spells existing in the form of cantrips. In order to cast a spell of 1st level or higher, you need to expend a spell slot of that spell's level in order to cast it. How many spell slots do you have? Well, that's determined by your class and the level in that class. You should look to this chart if you are a full caster like a wizard or a sorcerer, or this chart if you are a half caster like the ranger or the paladin. Now, you aren't limited at casting a spell at just the level it's designated. You can cast a spell at a higher level using a spell slot of a higher level. This is called upcasting. Take a spell like Magic Missile, for instance. It's a 1st level spell, so you can cast it using a 1st level spell slot, or you can use any spell slot above that from 2nd to 9th level. But a spell like Control Weather, which is an 8th level spell, you can only use a spell slot of 8th or 9th level to cast that. Are there ways to cast spells without expending spell slots? Yes, actually. There are 3 different ways you can do it. The first one, and the one that you are probably going to become most familiar with if you are a full caster, is cantrips. They are essentially 0 level spells. You can cast them as many times as you want. The only limit is how many you can know, which is determined by your class. They also scale with your character level, not your class level, so even if you split 3-2 across a martial class and a spellcasting class, you are going to be able to cast it as though you were a 5th level character, which generally means increasing the damage die. The next option is ritual casting. Now, not every spell is capable of being cast as a ritual. When you go to find the spell in the book or online, look next to its School of Magic, and then in parentheses you will see ritual next to it. That will let you know that it is capable of being cast as a ritual. Also, only certain classes have access to ritual casting, but in order to cast a spell as a ritual, you just need to add 10 minutes onto the time it takes to cast the ritual. So, if it takes a minute to cast a spell and you want to cast it as a ritual, the total time would be 11 minutes. And then there is the racial spellcasting trait. Now, not every race gives you this, but some, like Tieflings, will give you the ability to cast a 1st level spell once, and then you need to finish a long rest. It essentially is 1 spell slot that is only good for 1 spell in particular. But spell slots are not the only thing that is required when casting spells. Spells have 3 requirements generally on how they are cast, and that is verbal, somatic, and material. Verbal components are fairly simple. It is a certain phrase or word you have to utter, similar to how the spells in Harry Potter work, where they have to shout out the name of the spell in order for it to work. Next is somatic, which is hand gestures that signal the certain style of spell to work, akin to bending in Avatar: The Last Airbender. And lastly, there is material components. These are things like a piece of copper wire for message, or a spicy pepper for dragon's breath. They are things that which you cast the spell through. Now, you don't always need these. If you have an arcane focus or a component pouch, you can kind of skip over needing the material component for spells, but there are exceptions to this. If a spell mentions that it has a certain gold worth that needs to be used for the spell, such as Summon Undead needs a 300 gold piece gilded human skull in order to be cast, you must have that item. And then there are spells like resurrection spells that need a diamond worth a certain amount of gold in order to be cast, but they use it upon casting, so you need a new one every time you want to cast the spell. But that about covers it for the introduction to spellcasting. There's a lot more specifics to go over in terms of how certain classes use spellcasting and gain spells, but that's going to be covered more in the videos on each class. If you have any questions, leave them down below in the comments. Other than that, you do the usual YouTube stuff, like, subscribe. If you made it this far, thank you. I actually do really appreciate people watching my videos to completion. But other than that, happy gaming. Until next time.